Hi everyone. So my name's Sarah Flynn and I'm a New Zealander. I'm a consultant ecologist is my background, and that's what I do. I work for a environmental consultancy, and so I'm going to try and whip through this really quickly because really what I'm presenting today is simply a case study that will perhaps provide a little bit of fodder to talk about. Okay. This doesn't show up on there. Okay, so this is a project that I'm currently working on. It's been going since 2016, and so I don't know how many of you are familiar with New Zealand, but this is it's a site in the Waitakere Ranges, which is a big patch of peri-urban forest on the edge of Auckland City, which is the largest city in New Zealand. And the project itself is a new water treatment plant, so it's for fresh water, drinking water. The catchments for water for Auckland City, not entirely, but a large proportion of the water comes from the Waitakere Ranges. And so, and the infrastructure to treat the water supply is in a really poor state. It's about 100 years old, so the treatment plant needs replacing. Of course, the logistics of replacing a water treatment plant mean that you can't replace it in the site that it's currently working, but you do need to keep the treatment plant at the right elevation and within close proximity to your water supply for various reasons. There are engineering reasons I won't go into. So the issue here, of course, is that the reason why really a large proportion of this area remains forested was because of the water supply 100 years ago. It was recognised that you need to keep a forested catchment to have clean drinking water. But of course what that means is that now when you want to replace the water treatment plant, you have to put the new treatment plant in a forested area, hence ecological impacts associated with that footprint. So we've been doing a project describing, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the project itself, describing the, what am I going to say? Oh yes, describing what we've done in terms of the study on the area. We've done quite a detailed study, flora and fauna, vegetation loss, looking at the structure of the forest that's in the area. There are some, this area has a lot of history actually of, though I said, the area was kept in forest, it's been very cut over, modified, parts were converted to farmland and burnt repeatedly for some years. So there's a complex forest structure, and some bits are better than others is basically the outcome of that. And so we did quite a lot of detailed study, and then we looked at, there we go, looked at the impact assessment and basically used the information that we had to evaluate the ecological integrity. We created a map, which I'm not going to show you, which identified the better and worse areas. We also found something I haven't pointed out to you is that this site is not right in the heart of the ranges. It's actually on the edge of the ranges, and it's within a somewhat urbanised area. So there's quite a lot of residential development around this site, and so interesting finds. For example, we really expected that we might have some quite high fauna values because of the state of the bush there, but actually we found we didn't find much. And the difficulty with that, of course, is that we're looking for cryptic species like boreal lizards that are nocturnal, and the canopy of the forest is quite tall. So actually finding these things can be hit and miss, especially when you have quite a suppressed population. I don't know what you know about New Zealand, but also we have fauna populations that are not well adapted to mammalian predators because we only have bats basically as terrestrial mammals, tiny little microbats. And now we have a lot of pest problems with brush-tailed possums from Australia, rats, stoats, mustards, feral cats. So in a peri-urban area like this, a lot of those populations that we went looking for are very likely to be very suppressed by the presence of all these pest species. So then what? Okay, so we assessed the impact, blah, you know all about that, I'm sure, how to do that. And then we started thinking about an offset for the loss. We did put, and we have really, the process of doing this, as I say, this project's been going since 2016, and for the last couple of years I really thought that we might be able to tell you what happened. Well, I can't, because we're still doing it. And the process of doing this, doing the identification of high-value areas, has been a really important and useful conversation for really pushing the engineers to minimise and redesign the footprint. Of course, the other complicating factor here is that when you design a project like a water treatment plant, what the engineers really often don't want to do is to provide a detailed design, the kind of water treatment plant that you're going to use, because they want to actually contract that out and get the best price for the development of the design. So they really just want to consent an envelope. They want to get, so they'll tell you how big they think they'll need and that they can definitely build a treatment plant with a degree of certainty within the footprint that they've told you, and then you go and assess the effect of that. You don't actually have the design that you're going to be using. So there was a lot of conversation around it really has to be this big, I don't really believe you, can you make it smaller? No, we really can't. Well, can you avoid these trees? No, we really can't. Well, it's really important because otherwise, your client is going to have a really, really huge bill. Oh, well, maybe, because maybe actually it's just more expensive to make it smaller. It's slightly riskier, well, somewhat riskier and somewhat more expensive the smaller you get, right? But that interaction is a really, really important part of this process. So it's not necessarily all about the end story. It's about this iterative, non-linear process that Chris Murphy was talking about. So where did we get to in terms of the outcome? Rather than going and starting with metrics and offset calculations and accounting models and currencies, I hate all that, and I can tell you why. We might get to that later. I looked at this and said, what does this system most need? As we said, we've got a forest ecosystem with a lot of people living it that have had quite major impacts. We have a big pest burden. We have, we have a history of modification and regeneration, so there's a whole lot of things going on here. What can we actually achieve too? Remembering that all this area is mostly not the western side, that's all reserve land. And also bear in mind this map, this is a terrible map, but what the green shows you is public reserve land, and what the pale colour shows you is residential land. But the pale coloured residential land is mostly covered in bush, recognised significant ecological area in the local district plan. And so what can we achieve? Well, we can't achieve setting all this area aside and covenanting it all and deciding that that's our offset. And so at this point we've been having a conversation with the regulators and with other stakeholders, Department of Conservation and the residents. There's a lot of recognition of the ecological issues here, but the concern that we get a lot is, well, if you do your offset here, and what I've proposed is to actually invest in the restoration and ecological management of this whole catchment. So the footprint actually, we've reduced the footprint down to under 3 hectares from an initial estimate of about 10. But while the catchment that we're looking to do the management in is about 700. And so that's a pretty big area to do the management in. But the question is it certain? Is it additional? I think I can move on to the next slide, actually. Yeah, here we go. Is it an offset? Well, this is a conversation we're having with the regulator. I should also note that in New Zealand, the regulator, the local authority, certainly in Auckland and in some other parts of the country, we have I won't go into the whole regulatory structure, we can talk about that, that's an issue. But in Auckland, the regulators have really embraced the idea of an offset, of offsetting principles and things. But as Chris Murphy was talking about, applying them rather dogmatically. So a lot of the questions that we get relate to, but it's not really additional because, there are already people doing pest management in this area. There are various, little groups that are doing pest management completely ineffectually, I have to say, because they're not managing a big enough area to actually make a difference. So they haven't got an area that's an effective pest management area. And they don't have, because a lot of it's partly voluntary, they don't have enough people actually doing it comprehensively. So pest management is happening. And so the regulators are telling us, well, you can't really count that because they're sort of doing it, even though it's having no outcome. And then the local authority, well, they're responsible for that section down the side. And so they're saying, well, that's not additional because it's their obligation to do that and they have a pest management plan and whatever, but still not really doing it effectively. And so again, talking to Chris's point, one of the key aspects of our proposal is to actually provide an umbrella trust that coordinates and administers and provides a long-term sort of body that is responsible for managing this area. That's a really important part of the project, and that's probably the thing that has the most legs in the long term. But we can't commit to doing this forever in perpetuity. We can't commit the applicant to that. It's just not reasonable on the basis of a 3-hectare impact. But in terms of the legacy that the project leaves, I think that's the difference. Permanence and certainty versus legacy. Are we sufficiently shifting the bar? I mean, my argument is that we are, but it's a very live argument in terms of a conversation with the regulator. So there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things is an offset. So that's a kind of a summary of what I've been saying. And as you can see, I haven't done any benchmarking, currencying or accounting modelling. So the feedback really is no net loss is not demonstrated here. And I don't think that it's possible to demonstrate no net loss ever, actually, in those currencies. And I can tell you the reasons why if anyone's interested. I think that, as I say, the explanation involves accounting for variability. The short answer is that those currencies, they don't. They generally use the mean as the model of the data, or various means that then they somehow conflate into a single mean. Variability in ecology is the story. The mean is not the story. If I treated you all like a cloud of points on a map, like a scatter plot, and if I drew a line through the middle of you, the line would go down the centre of the room. It's not a representative number. It doesn't mean anything if you don't consider, for example, the distance away from the centre of the room. That's the relevant bit of data, right? That's the residual. That's what we call the residual through, all statistics is a line through a cloud of data. And the interesting bit of the statistic is the distance away from the data that your point is. But we use means without considering that in these models. All ecologists, so I'm going to start ranting any minute, so yeah, all ecologists know that, yeah. Yes, you can, because I'm starting in the conversation. And then later we can talk about stone soup. If any of you know that parable, you'll probably get what I mean. So I'll stop there, yeah.